My name is Steve Jobs. I'm the guy behind the iPhone in your pocket. People have called me a genius, a perfectionist, sometimes even impossible to work with. But they've also said I changed the world. Stay hungry, stay foolish. That was one of my favorites. I believed in dreaming bigger than logic allowed. Just like Thomas Edison lit up the world with electricity, I tried to do the same, with ideas. Tonight, I will tell you the story of my life. Here's something most people don't realize. I was adopted. I wasn't born into a glamorous tech family. Nope. I was born in San Francisco in 1955 to a young, scared college student and a Syrian immigrant father. They weren't ready. But there was a couple, Paul and Clara Jobs, in Mountain View, just south of San Francisco, who had been waiting and praying for a child. And I became theirs. Now let's pause for a second. Think about that. If you were adopted as a baby, didn't know your birth parents, but ended up right in the middle of what would later be called Silicon Valley, would you think it was fate? Paul Jobs worked with his hands. He was a mechanic and a craftsman. I still remember how he'd explained to me that even the back of a cabinet, the part no one would ever see, should be beautiful. Done right. Done with pride. That attention to detail, that stayed with me for life. I wasn't the easiest kid. I was clever. Too clever sometimes. I'd get bored easily. At school, I played pranks. I got into trouble. Teachers said I was bright but hard to manage. Sound familiar to anyone you know? Maybe even you? At home, we lived modestly. Our little house on Crist Drive in Los Altos was small, nothing fancy. But it had something magical. A garage. And back then, Mountain View and the surrounding towns weren't booming tech hubs yet. They were just sleepy neighborhoods with orchards and quiet streets. But a strange thing was happening in the background. Companies like Hewlett-Packard were popping up. Tinkerers, engineers, dreamers. They were building the future, one transistor at a time. When I was a teenager, I got a summer job at Hewlett-Packard. Not glamorous. I was stuffing parts into plastic bags, but it felt like being in the heart of a spaceship. All those blinking lights and humming machines. You could feel the energy. One night, I needed a part for a school project, so I picked up the phone and called the CEO of HP, Bill Hewlett. Just like that. Imagine a teenager doing that today. He actually answered, talked to me, and gave me what I needed. That's how open the world was back then. Hungry minds got fed. It was around this time I met Steve Wozniak. We called him Woz. He was older than me, and a genius. Truly, the kind of guy who could build a computer from scratch just for fun. We met through a mutual friend and instantly clicked. He had the brains, I had the vision. We both loved practical jokes, electronics, and the thrill of bending rules. You ever meet someone who makes you think, together we could build something woot? Woz was that person for me. We'd spend hours talking in that garage, surrounded by wires, soldering irons, and dreams. Even then, I wasn't thinking small. I didn't want to just play with tech. I wanted to make it human, friendly, useful, beautiful. My childhood shaped everything. From the precision my dad taught me in the garage, to the thrill of breaking norms at school, to the encouragement of people like Bill Hewlett taking my call. It was like the universe conspired to put me right there, in a time, a place with the right people, to dream. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you could send a message to me in the past, what would you write? Leave a comment below. Now listen to this interesting story about my life journey. My early years weren't flashy, but they were full of sparks. And those sparks were about to set something ablaze. I just didn't know it yet. Woz and I were about to make something that would change not just our lives, but yours too. The garage becomes our world. Woz and I are there constantly, hunched over circuit boards, wires everywhere like a nest of bright metal spaghetti. You ever feel so obsessed with something that the hours just vanish? That's what it's like for us. The sound of a soldering iron heating up is like a lullaby to me now. It's 1975, I'm 20. Woz is 5 years older. We're attending meetings of the Homebrew Computer Club in Menlo Park. It's just a group of geeks, really brilliant geeks, meeting in someone's garage or a small auditorium, talking about a crazy new thing called the personal computer. Up until now, computers are giant, expensive machines locked away in universities or corporations. But the dream, the one we're all chasing, is to shrink that power into something you can keep in your own home. Now imagine this. You're in your 20s. You're barefoot, maybe a little scruffy, long hair, a little wild-eyed. And someone just told you, hey, you could make a machine that changes how humans think, work, and live. What would you do? That's what we felt in those meetings. Woz builds a computer. I mean, really builds it. It's not just a bunch of wires. He actually gets the thing to work. A screen, a keyboard, and it runs. He calls it the Apple I. It's nothing fancy yet. Just a motherboard you can plug into a monitor and keyboard. But it works. It's the future. And I know it. Woz is modest. We can just give away the plans, he says, smiling. People can build it themselves. I shake my head. No, Woz. We can sell this. That's the first big difference between us. Woz is the engineer. He creates for the joy of it. I'm the visionary. I see not just what it is, but what it could become. I don't just want to build a computer. I want to build a company, a brand, a revolution, so I convince him. But we need money. I sell my VW microbus. Woz sells his HP calculator, his prized calculator. That one hurts, but it gives us just enough to build a few boards, buy parts, and get things going. That's all we need. A tiny spark. And the garage at 2066 Christ Drive becomes Apple's first office. Let's pause here. If you were me, standing in that garage with zero experience, a big idea, and exactly $1,300 scraped together, would you gamble it all? That was the moment, the leap. And we took it. Our first big break comes when a local computer shop, the Byte Shop, orders 50 Apple I computers. But there's a catch. They want fully assembled machines, not just kits. We panic, scramble, build everything by hand. Our friends help. My parents feed everyone. The smell of soldering smoke fills the house. And somehow, we pull it off. 50 machines delivered. That taste of success? It's addictive. I get this glint in my eye. I want more. Bigger. Better. We choose the name Apple for our company. People always ask, why Apple? It's simple. I had just come back from an apple farm in Oregon. I liked the sound. Clean, friendly, not intimidating like Computech 3000 or Microtronics. And alphabetically, it came before Atari, where I'd once worked building circuit boards at night. That helped in phone books. Yep, phone books were still a thing. So we're now Apple Computer Inc., a couple of kids in a garage. But things are moving fast. The Apple I gets attention. Then Woz starts designing the Apple II, far more powerful, with a color screen and a sleek plastic case. I focus on packaging, branding, how the user feels the moment they see the box. That obsession with beauty, it's there already. By 1977, we're no longer just two guys in a garage. We bring in an experienced adult, Mike Markkula. He invests $250,000 and gives us structure. Suddenly, we're hiring people, getting an office, wearing shoes. Well, sometimes. Markkula teaches me about marketing, about shaping perception. He says something I never forget. People do judge a book by its cover. Make sure the cover is great. That becomes part of Apple's soul. You walk into a store and see an Apple II. It's like nothing else. Simple, elegant, powerful. We sell 6 million of them. That's how it starts. From a garage with $0 to a company with its first million in the bank. I still remember those late nights. Woz scribbling code. Me arguing over fonts. Both of us dreaming out loud. And I wonder, if you were in that garage with us, would you have stayed up all night soldering? Risked your savings on a dream? Leave a comment. I'd love to hear what kind of visionary you'd be. And remember, every empire begins with a small, crazy idea. Ours began with a motherboard on a wooden table in a garage that smelled like burnt plastic and teenage ambition. Success comes fast, almost too fast. By 1978, Apple is booming. We've sold thousands of Apple IIs. The company is no longer just me and Woz in a garage. We have offices, employees, a logo, and our own little parking lot filled with cars that belong to people who believe in what we're building. But here's the thing. With success comes pressure. And I thrive on pressure. At just 23 years old, I'm worth over $1 million. Not bad for a barefoot dropout. And yet, I'm not celebrating. Because money isn't the goal. Not really. I'm chasing something else. The thrill of inventing the future. We're already thinking beyond the Apple II. I start imagining a computer that's not just powerful, but friendly. Something that talks to you in pictures, not just text and blinking green cursors. Something even your grandma could use. So we get to work. I start forming a small team. I handpick them. Not just for skill, but for passion. I want artists, rebels, oddballs. I call them pirates. And our little crew starts working on what will become the Apple Lisa, named after my daughter. Though at the time, I deny she's mine. It's one of the mistakes I carry with me even now. Yes, I had a daughter. Her name is Lisa Nicole Brennan. She's born in 1978. Her mother, Chrisanne Brennan and I had been together back in high school and on and off after that. But when Lisa is born, I'm cold. I deny being her father publicly. I give interviews where I twist words, hide behind math and test results. Looking back now, I was scared, immature, obsessed with building Apple, with proving something to the world and to myself. And in the process, I hurt people, especially her. So if you were me, barely out of your teens, balancing $1 million company and a newborn child, what would you have done differently? I know what I should have done, but at the time, I chose work. Anyway, back to the tech. The Lisa project becomes huge. We're aiming to be the first to bring a graphical user interface to market, something we'd seen in rough form during a tour of Xerox PARC, a research center in Palo Alto. Their computers showed windows, icons, a mouse. You could point and click. It felt like magic. They didn't know what they had. But I did. I practically bounced out of the building. "This is the future!" I shouted. So we steal some of those ideas, and we start shaping them into something sleek, intuitive, and beautiful. The Lisa is the beginning of what Apple would always be. A company that doesn't just build machines, but experiences. But the Lisa has a problem. Well, actually, several. It's too expensive. It's too slow. And because of my erratic behavior and perfectionism, the Lisa team gets frustrated. Eventually, I'm pushed out of the project entirely. Yep. They boot me from the thing named after my own daughter. But I'm not done. Oh no. I turn my attention to a secret side project, a new machine. It will be smaller, cheaper, friendlier. I gather my pirate crew, hang a skull and crossbones flag above our office and say, "It's better to be a pirate than to join the Navy." That line becomes our battle cry. This machine, this rebellion, will become the Macintosh. The early 1980s are wild. Tech companies are springing up like weeds. IBM enters the personal computer market. They're big, boring, slow, but trusted. We have to be better, cooler, different. So we pour everything into the Mac. I obsess over the way it looks. The curve of the case, the sound it makes when it starts up. I argue over fonts, spacing, even the shade of beige. Design isn't just what it looks like, I tell my team. It's how it works. But I push people hard. I yell, I insult, I fire people on the spot. Perfection comes at a price, and people start to whisper, "Steve's out of control." They're not wrong. I'm demanding, unforgiving. But I see what others don't. I see the future, and it's almost ready. We plan the launch of the Macintosh like it's a rock concert. I want it to feel like something out of a dream. I want people to remember the moment forever. And they do. January 24th, 1984. I step on stage in my black turtleneck and jeans, light beaming from behind me. I pull the cover off the Mac and let it speak, literally. "Hello, I'm Macintosh," it says, and the crowd gasps. It's not just a machine, it's alive. That launch becomes legendary. People still talk about it. The 1984 Super Bowl ad, directed by Ridley Scott, shows a lone runner smashing through a screen, freeing people from conformity. 1984 won't be like 1984, the tagline reads. and for a moment, we feel unstoppable. But remember, behind every dream is a storm coming, and mine was gathering strength. You know how sometimes, right after your biggest triumph, the world starts to unravel? That's what 1985 felt like for me. After the roaring success of the Macintosh launch, I thought I was on top of the world. 29 years old, icon, millionaire, face of innovation. But underneath the surface, things were splintering and fast. The truth is, the Macintosh wasn't selling, not the way we dreamed. Yes, it was beautiful. It had a friendly interface, that famous smile at startup, but it was expensive. It had very little memory. And worst of all, it was slow. People loved the idea of it, but they weren't buying it in the numbers we needed. We had created a piece of art, but the market wanted a workhorse. Inside Apple, the tension got thick. I was clashing constantly with John Scully, the CEO I had personally recruited from Pepsi. Remember that quote? Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world? That was me convincing him to join. And for a while we were a team. But that didn't last. I was too intense, too demanding, too impatient. And John? He was practical, corporate, careful. We saw things differently. And the board began to see me as the problem. They thought I was reckless, impossible to manage, and maybe they were right. I didn't want to run a company. I wanted to run a revolution. So here's the moment. The boardroom is silent, tense. Scully has presented his case. The Macintosh isn't delivering. We need focus, structure. And then it comes. They've sided with him. I'm effectively being removed from my own company. Can you imagine that? At age 30, I'm being pushed out of the company I founded in my parents' garage. Apple, my Apple, is choosing a Pepsi executive over me. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Begged to stay? Lashed out? Walked away quietly? I walked, but not quietly. I left Apple in 1985 with a bruised ego, a stormy heart, and nothing but time on my hands. And honestly, I was devastated. I walked alone through the hills of Palo Alto thinking, what now? For a while, I thought my best days were behind me. But the funny thing about being knocked down is, sometimes, it clears space for something new to grow. I started a new company, Next, a sleek, futuristic name for a sleek, futuristic machine. I wanted to build the perfect computer for universities and research labs. I poured everything into it: design, function, materials. Even the packaging was custom-made. We created a beautiful black cube with magnesium casing and a next-generation operating system. It cost too much. It took too long. It never really sold. But it was brilliant underneath. And years later, that brilliance would become the foundation for macOS and iOS. Funny how life works. But Next wasn't my only new beginning. I also bought a small graphics division from George Lucas. You may have heard of it. Pixar. Yeah, that Pixar. Back then, it wasn't making movies. It was building hardware and software for animation. But deep inside it was a genius named Ed Catmull and a dream to make the first fully computer-animated feature film. And I saw it. I invested, encouraged, and believed. And over the next few years, I helped guide Pixar from a tech lab to a storytelling powerhouse. We were planting the seeds of Toy Story, and we didn't even know yet how much magic would bloom. Looking back, getting kicked out of Apple was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It gave me the freedom to learn, to fail again, to rediscover myself. I was still angry, sure, still stubborn. But I was growing up. If I hadn't been fired, I wouldn't have started Next. I wouldn't have bought Pixar. And maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't have grown into the man who would one day return to Apple and transform it into the most valuable company on earth. So I ask you, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? And what did it clear space for? Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your story. That year, 1985, felt like the end. But it wasn't. It was a comma, a breath, a necessary silence before the next crescendo. Because the story wasn't over. Not even close. Time passes. Years roll on. And while Apple moves forward without me, I'm over here, slowly building something new. Two things, actually. Next is where I'm pouring most of my energy. We're trying to create the perfect computer for higher education and research. Not just another PC, no, something elegant, something powerful. It's black, minimalist, like a cube from the future. The kind of object you'd expect to find humming on the desk of a scientist trying to bend time. But it's expensive, too expensive. And every time we think we've nailed it, the tech world moves a little further ahead. Our machines are works of art, but art doesn't always sell. So we don't sell many. But we're building something even more valuable beneath the surface. Next step, our operating system. And that OS, well, it's going to outlive the cube. You'll see. Meanwhile, over at Pixar, something magical is happening. The team's working on a short film called Tin Toy. It's cute, charming, and fully animated on computers. A tiny toy trying to survive a terrifying baby. It's a proof of concept, really. But it wins an Oscar, and that changes everything. Suddenly, people stop seeing Pixar as just a tech company. They start seeing us as storytellers. And then comes the big leap. We start working with Disney to create the world's first full-length computer-animated movie. The risk? Immense. The budget? Growing. The stakes? Higher than ever. I'm funding most of it. If this fails, I lose more than money. I lose the last great dream I have left. The movie is called Toy Story, and in 1995 it hits theaters. Boom, a blockbuster, a revolution. Critics love it, kids adore it, adults cry during it. Pixar becomes a household name overnight. Woody and Buzz Lightyear aren't just characters. They're symbols of a new kind of storytelling. Suddenly, I'm not just the guy who once built Apple. I'm also the executive behind Toy Story. People stop asking, what happened to Steve Jobs? They start saying, wait, he did that too? That year, something else happens. Something quieter. More personal. Apple calls. They're not doing great. The company's lost its edge. They've gone through CEOs like water. The products feel uninspired, and they need help. Now imagine this. The very company that once pushed me out is now asking me to come back. Humbling, right? Or maybe it's justice. If you were me, what would you say? At first, I don't jump. I say no. I don't want to be just an advisor or figurehead. I'm not coming back to watch. I'll only come back if I can make a real difference. So we negotiate. And eventually, they don't just want me. They want Next. In 1996, Apple buys Next for $429 million. And just like that, I'm back. It's surreal walking through those halls again. Faces have changed. The culture has shifted. But some things are still the same. There's potential here. There's heart. Apple's still got a soul. It just needs a little fire. I become interim CEO. A weird title. People start calling me the ICEO with a wink. But I don't care about the label. I'm focused, older, a little wiser. I've been humbled by failure and sharpened by time. Now, I'm ready. I start cutting projects, trimming the fat. Apple had too many products, too many directions. I say, focus on 4 things: a consumer desktop, a pro desktop, a consumer laptop, and a pro laptop. Simplicity. That's always been the secret. We clean up the branding. We redesign the packaging. We throw out clunky interfaces and start rethinking what computers should feel like again. And in 1998, we unveil the iMac. Bright colors, rounded curves, transparent casing. It looks like candy, and it sells like candy. People fall in love with Apple again. Kids want one in their bedroom. Teachers want them in classrooms. It's fun, friendly, and fast. Just like that, Apple is back on its feet. And I'm home. Looking back, it still amazes me how Pixar and Next, the 2 side projects born from my exile, would both end up shaping the next chapter of my story. Sometimes the doors that close are just steering you toward the right one. So, if life has ever pushed you away from something you thought you couldn't live without, just remember, maybe it was clearing the way for something even better. I had no idea that my biggest inventions, my most iconic moments, were still ahead of me. You know that moment when a spark becomes a flame? That's where I am now. Apple is breathing again, but it's not enough for me to bring it back to life. I want to make it fly. By 1999, I'm deep in the trenches. We've launched the iMac, and it's a hit, yes. But to me, the iMac is just the beginning. What I see next is a future built not just on devices, but on experiences. Seamless, beautiful, intuitive experiences that put people, not technology, at the center. But here's the truth. Apple is still fragile. We've got a narrow product line and a shaky market share. The media calls us the comeback kid, but the pressure is huge. I'm running on caffeine, adrenaline, and this relentless whisper inside me that says, "You're not done yet." This is when we start building what I call the digital hub. Computers aren't just for spreadsheets anymore. They're for music, movies, photos. They're becoming the center of people's digital lives. And I want Apple to be at the heart of that. So we take a leap. In 2001, we launch Mac OS X, built on the bones of Next Step. Remember that? The elegant operating system from my exile? Well, here it is, reborn, stable, sleek, and future-proof. It's not perfect, not yet, but it lays the groundwork for everything to come. And then comes the device that changes everything. A tiny thing. White. Clean. with a little wheel and a screen. We call it the iPod. When I first see the prototype, I know this is it. 1,000 songs in your pocket. That's the tagline. And suddenly, music isn't bound by CDs or clunky players. It's with you, everywhere. We launch it in 2001 and people are skeptical at first. It only works on Mac. It's expensive. But slowly, surely, the magic spreads. The commercials, those silhouettes dancing to music with the white earbuds, become cultural icons. And then something wild happens. Windows users start buying Macs just to use the iPod. Can you imagine that? We're creating not just products, but gravitational pull. Apple is becoming more than a company. It's becoming a lifestyle. But during all this, I'm changing too. By now, I'm in my mid-40s. My edges are softer. I've become a father, 3 kids at home. I'm still obsessive, still laser-focused, but I'm learning to listen more, to step back and let brilliant teams rise. One of those teams is working on something secret, a phone. But let me pause here. Because even while all this forward motion is happening, music, software, beautiful design, life has a way of catching you off guard. In October 2003, I get a scan for something completely unrelated, and they find a tumor in my pancreas. Cancer. But here's the catch. It's a rare kind. The kind that might be curable with surgery if caught early. I get the diagnosis, I sit with it, and I don't act right away. I try alternative diets. I try to will it away. For 9 months, I delay the inevitable. Looking back, I don't know why. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I didn't want to admit I was mortal. Maybe I thought I could outsmart it. Eventually, I get the surgery. They remove part of my pancreas. For a while, it seems like things are okay. But in the background, the clock is ticking. And now let me ask you something. If you found out your time was limited, what would you do differently? Would you slow down or speed up? For me, it was the latter. I pressed harder, dreamed bigger, because I knew there was still more I had to give. And now, looking back at that quiet moment in a hospital room, when the doctors told me the odds, I see it as the turning point. Everything after this would be in borrowed time. Everything after this would matter even more. Also, I can still remember standing on the stage in January 2007, under those bright lights at Macworld in San Francisco, holding a small rectangle in my hand and watching thousands of eyes follow every move I made. I said, "Today, we're introducing 3 revolutionary products. The first one is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile phone. And the third is a breakthrough internet communications device." And then I repeated it. An iPod, a phone, an internet communicator, and again, and again. Until the crowd began to buzz, until the realization dawned that this wasn't 3 separate products. This was one device. "This," I said, holding it up, "is the iPhone." There was a moment of stunned silence, then an eruption of applause. We had just changed everything, again. If you were in my place, standing in front of the world with a secret you'd been holding for years, how would you feel? Nervous? Proud? Terrified? I felt all of it. But mostly, I felt ready. We had spent over 2 years working on the iPhone, thousands of prototypes, endless arguments, technical nightmares, touchscreens that failed, glass that cracked, software bugs that felt impossible to fix. But we pushed. We fought through every setback because we believed. We believed that people were ready for something better, that a phone didn't need to be a dull tool. It could be beautiful, intelligent, friendly. And it wasn't just the product. It was what the iPhone represented. It was the next chapter in the story I had been writing since that garage in Los Altos. A story about making technology human, about removing friction, removing fear, and replacing it with joy. And it worked. The iPhone launched later that year. It sold millions. Lines wrapped around Apple stores. People slept on sidewalks just to be among the first. We had created something more than a phone. We'd created a symbol. You probably don't even remember a world before the iPhone now, do you? A world of clunky flip phones, buttons you had to press 3 times to type a letter, web browsers that barely worked. The iPhone changed that. It made the internet mobile. It put a camera in every hand. It brought email, maps, music, and messages into your pocket. It didn't just change how we communicate. It changed us. But here's what you might not know. That first iPhone, it barely worked. Behind the scenes, it was held together with duct tape and dreams. We had demo phones that could only follow a precise path. Press one wrong app, and it would crash. The night before launch, we were still panicking over bugs, but I knew if we waited for perfect, we'd never ship anything. So we shipped, and the world responded. Now I could have stopped there. A normal person might have, but I wasn't wired that way. I kept going. In the years that followed, we released the App Store, opening the door for millions of developers to build their own dreams. We launched the iPad. We redesigned MacBooks. We brought iOS to cars, to watches, to homes. Each step forward was harder than the last. The expectations got heavier. The spotlight got hotter. And quietly, behind it all, my health was slipping. I didn't tell people right away. Not publicly. I didn't want the narrative to shift. I didn't want sympathy. I just wanted to do the work, to keep building. Because I still had things left to say. Still had tools to leave behind. Still had a world I wasn't ready to let go of. So I poured myself into Apple, into products, into people, and I held on. Let me ask you something. If your body was beginning to fail you, but your mind was still sharp, would you slow down? Or would you race against the clock? Every keynote I gave felt more urgent. Every product felt like a love letter to the future. I wanted to leave something behind that would outlast me, something that would whisper to future generations. This was possible. And so every time I walked on that stage, thin, tired, but still standing, I was saying, I'm still here, and I wasn't done yet. There's a strange clarity that comes when you know your time is finite. You stop wasting energy on noise. You start moving with purpose. Every conversation matters more. Every product. Every idea. By 2010, I was visibly thinner, my voice softer, Whispers were circulating in the media. Was I okay? Was I dying? But inside Apple, I was as focused as ever. That year, we released the iPad. Now, tablets weren't a new idea. Companies had been trying to make them work for years, but they were always awkward, slow, complicated, just shrunken down laptops. I didn't want that. I wanted something different, something intimate. A device you could cradle on the couch, read with, watch movies on. A canvas that disappeared when you touched it. The iPad wasn't about computing. It was about connecting. And once again, people didn't quite get it at first. It's just a big iPhone, they said. But then kids picked it up. Artists started sketching on it. Seniors discovered they could video call their grandchildren with just a tap. We had built something that crossed generations, and I remember thinking, this is what it's all about. If you were me, watching people light up because of something you helped create, wouldn't you feel that same quiet joy? But behind the scenes, I was struggling. In 2009, I'd taken a medical leave for a liver transplant. My body was wearing out faster than the world knew. Each return to Apple was harder than the last. I was spending more time with my family, holding my kids tighter, watching sunsets more slowly. And yet, I kept showing up. Not because I was addicted to work, but because I believed in the people around me, in what we were building, in what Apple had become. You know, people sometimes call Apple a tech company, but to me it was always an art studio. We didn't just make gadgets. We made poetry with aluminum and glass. We sculpted emotion into silicon. Every product was a little love letter from our hearts to yours. In my final years, I spent a lot of time with Jonathan Ive, our design chief. Johnny and I, we had a language all our own. We could sit in silence, staring at a rounded corner or a typeface for hours. We weren't chasing profits. We were chasing beauty. Even in my most fragile days, when I could barely stand, I would go to the design lab, run my hand over the latest prototype, close my eyes, and feel the future in my palm. Because Apple was never just about what we made. It was about how we made people feel. In August 2011, I made the hardest decision of my life. I stepped down as CEO. I handed the reins to Tim Cook, a man I trusted, respected, admired. Tim wasn't loud like me. He wasn't showy. But he was steady, thoughtful, tireless. I knew he would carry the torch with integrity. When I wrote my resignation letter, I kept it simple. I said that I believed Apple's brightest days were still ahead, and I meant it. Even now, years later, as you hold your phone, scroll through memories, read this story, I hope you feel a little of that magic, because I poured everything into it. If you could send a message back to me in those final months, me, sitting quietly in my garden, thinking about the future, what would you say? Would you say thank you? Would you tell me what our work meant to you? Leave a comment if you'd like. I'd love to know. I still remember one of my last public appearances. It was June 7th, 2011, at a Cupertino City Council meeting. I stood before the council, thin, in my black sweater and jeans, and shared my vision for a new Apple campus. A little like a spaceship landed, I said with a small smile. That building, the Ring, now known as Apple Park, was never just about architecture. It was a symbol, a legacy, a place designed for creativity, for beauty, for the next generation of thinkers and builders. I was deeply involved in every detail, where the glass curved, how the trees would be planted, even how the airflow would move through the space. I wanted it to feel alive, like nature and technology had finally become friends. If you were building a monument to your life's work, how would you design it? I didn't want statues or streets named after me. I wanted a living thing, a place where thousands of people could wake up every morning and make something great. That's what Apple Park is. It's my final canvas. In the months that followed, I grew weaker. Some days I couldn't eat. Others, I could barely speak. But my mind? Still sharp, still racing. I spent quiet hours at home in Palo Alto with Lorraine, my wife, my anchor. We talked, we read, we simply sat. My kids, Reed, Aaron, Eve, they gave me strength I didn't know I had. I wasn't always the perfect father. I had regrets, missed birthdays, missed moments. But I hoped, more than anything, that they knew I loved them, that I was proud of them, especially my daughter Lisa. There was a time in my life, one I'm not proud of, when I denied she was mine. I was young, scared, selfish, but over time I came to understand, to accept, to cherish her. She's brilliant, a writer now, with a voice all her own. If I could go back and change one thing, I might go back to those early days, be a better man, a better father. But life isn't a product you can edit and relaunch. It's messy, winding. Sometimes you only understand its shape when you look back from the end. I spent those final days mostly at home. No more keynotes, no more stage lights, just the hum of the world continuing on outside my window. People kept sending letters, messages, flowers. Some were from strangers, kids who'd saved up to buy their first Mac, teachers who used iPads in their classrooms, parents who FaceTimed with loved ones across the world. All of them saying the same thing: "You changed my life." And that meant more than I can say. Because I didn't do this alone. I had so many people by my side. Waz, Johnny, Tim, the teams at Apple, the fans who believed. I was just the storyteller, the conductor, the one pointing toward the stars. So now I ask you, if you were me, sitting in that garden, looking back on it all, would you feel peace? Would you feel like it was enough? Or would there always be one more thing? For me, I think it was both. Peace, and curiosity. Even at the end, I was wondering what would come next, what dreams would follow, what inventions were waiting just over the horizon. And I hoped, quietly, deeply, that something I'd built might help bring them into the world. October 5th, 2011. The sky over Palo Alto was a soft gray that day. I remember laying in bed, my breath growing slower, shallower, my body frail, barely holding on. But my mind, still wandering, still curious, was somewhere else. I could feel it. The end. But I wasn't afraid. I'd spent years thinking about death, long before illness made it real. I once said that death is very likely the single best invention of life. It clears out the old to make way for the new. A necessary change agent. Strange, isn't it? To find comfort in the idea of disappearing. But I didn't see it as disappearing. I saw it as transforming. In those last hours, my family surrounded me. Laureen held my hand. My children were there, quiet, brave, and I remember looking past them, beyond the room, beyond the pain, and whispering 3 final words. Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow. What did I see? A memory? A light? A glimpse of what comes next? I'll let you imagine that part. But if you were me, would you be ready to go? Or would you cling to one more moment, one more heartbeat? People always think I was obsessed with the future because of technology. But really, I was obsessed with it because I loved life. I loved beauty, simplicity, wonder. I didn't want more time, I just wanted to use the time I had well. And I think I did. When the news of my passing broke, people gathered outside Apple stores. Some left flowers, some lit candles, some simply stood, staring at the glowing logo in the window. And around the world, screens dimmed a little. But here's the beautiful part. The work continued. Apple went on. Tim stepped forward with grace and strength. The team launched new iPhones, new iPads, even an Apple Watch, something we'd dreamed of but never finished during my time. Apple Park was completed, a glass ring blooming like a modern-day Stonehenge. My fingerprints may have faded, but my voice, it echoed. Even now, you can still hear it in the click of a camera shutter, the buzz of a haptic touch, the simplicity of a white box opening for the first time. And maybe, just maybe, you hear it when someone says, "Think different." That wasn't just a slogan, it was a prayer. A call to the misfits, the rebels, the round pegs in the square holes. It was a promise that your weirdness, your boldness, your hunger to create, it mattered. If you're listening to this now and you've ever felt like you didn't fit, I want you to know something. That's your gift. Use it. Whether you're an artist, a coder, a teacher, or a dreamer, build something, say something, leave your mark. Because time is short, and the world needs your voice. It needed mine, and I gave it everything I had. So I ask you, one last time, if you could send a message to me, not as the CEO of Apple, not as the guy in the black turtleneck, but as Steve, a boy who once stared at stars and believed he could touch them. What would you say? Leave a comment. And remember, your journey is just beginning. After I passed, my name became something larger than life. People wrote books, made films. Some tried to turn me into a legend, others into a cautionary tale. But I was neither. I was just human. I had sharp edges. I could be demanding, impatient, obsessed. I pushed people hard, sometimes too hard. I saw the world not as it was, but as it could be, and I refused to settle for less. That didn't always make me easy to be around, but it made the work better, cleaner, truer. I used to say that real artists ship. That meant finishing what you start, facing the fear of imperfection, putting your creation into the world even when it's not flawless, because nothing ever is. If you were leading a team, building something big, would you have the strength to push when everyone around you says, "Good enough"? Would you hold the line for greatness? It's not easy, but it's necessary. The truth is, innovation doesn't come from a moment of inspiration. It comes from relentless refinement. From saying no 1,000 times for every one time you say yes. From walking away from good ideas to chase great ones. People saw the iPhone and said, "Of course." But they didn't see the prototypes we trashed. The nights we stayed up arguing over bezels and battery life. The long walks I took with Johnny, just talking through how a phone should feel. They didn't see the failures. But those moments, they were sacred. Apple was my cathedral, but also my crucible. And when I stepped away, I wondered, would it endure? Would the spirit remain? It did. Because by then, it wasn't just my company. It was a culture, a way of thinking, a belief that we could bend reality with enough care, enough courage, enough conviction. That belief lived on. And not just in Apple. All over the world, people took the tools we built and made things I never dreamed of. Apps that taught kids to read, devices that gave the blind new ways to see, music, films, poetry, business, an ecosystem of possibility. You, listening to this, you're part of it. Even now, maybe you've used your phone to create something beautiful, or made a video that touched someone, or sent a message that changed a life. Maybe the ripple started with us, but it ends with you. And that's what matters. That's what lasts. Because legacy isn't a statue. It's not a name carved into glass. It's a feeling, a fire that spreads quietly, constantly, from heart to heart. So ask yourself, if you had just a little time left, what would you build? What truth would you speak? What story would you tell? I built Apple, but your creation, your dream, could be just as powerful, maybe more. You know, I spent my whole life looking forward, thinking about the next thing, the next product, the next revolution. But now, from where I am, I can look back with a kind of quiet, peaceful detachment. Funny thing is, some of the memories that glow brightest aren't the big product launches or keynote moments. They're the small, human ones. I remember walking barefoot across the Stanford campus in the 70s, long before I knew what my path would be. Just a college dropout with more questions than answers. I'd crash in friends' dorm rooms, eat at the Hare Krishna temple for a warm meal, collect Coke bottles for spare change. You might think that sounds like a mess, but those were sacred days, because I was searching, and the search shaped me. Have you ever felt completely lost, yet strangely open? That was me. I wandered into calligraphy classes I wasn't even enrolled in. And years later, those same elegant letter forms made their way into the very first Macintosh. That attention to typography? It came from a wandering soul chasing beauty without knowing why. Life connects backward. If you're lost right now, or stuck, or unsure of your direction, trust me, the dots will connect, eventually. Another memory. Driving with Waz early on. Just two kids with soldering irons and a dream. We were building Apple I computers in his garage, placing circuit boards into wooden cases by hand. Our ambitions were big, but our tools were humble. That garage? It wasn't sacred. We made it sacred. You don't need a lab to build the future. You need focus, grit, and people who believe in something the world hasn't seen yet. Years later, people called Apple magical. But really, it was just a group of people who refused to stop asking, what if? What if we could carry 1,000 songs in our pocket? What if the computer felt more like a bicycle for the mind? What if we made it beautiful? That was always the final ingredient. Beauty. We obsessed over the unseen parts of products, the back of the circuit board, the curvature of a screw, because beauty matters, even if no one notices, especially if no one notices. So ask yourself, what are you creating right now that no one sees? What part of your work are you polishing in silence? That's your signature. That's your legacy. I had mine. And though I didn't live to see how far it would reach, I knew deep down that the spirit of what we started would keep growing, keep inspiring. Because the people we touch, they touch others. And that ripple, that never ends. One of the most powerful moments of my life came not from building a product, but from standing in front of a group of graduating students, young, bright, and still untouched by the bruises of the world. It was the 2005 Stanford commencement. I was wearing my usual black turtleneck, but this time no slides, no demos, no dramatic one more thing. Just me and a story. I told them about getting fired from Apple. Imagine that. Fired from the company I started. It hurt. Deeply. I felt like the ground had fallen out from beneath me. But I told them, the heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. I found freedom in failure, freedom to explore, to dream, to start again. Would you have the strength to begin again after being pushed out of your own story? I did, and it led to some of the best work of my life. I told them about love and loss, about Lorraine, about facing death. And I left them with one truth. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. That speech went on to touch millions, more than I ever imagined. But I wasn't trying to inspire. I was just telling the truth. And here's another truth. So many people spend their lives chasing what others expect. The right job, the right house, the right image. But none of that matters when you look mortality in the face. What matters is, did you follow your curiosity? Did you make something meaningful? Did you love deeply and truly? That's all. Looking back now, I'm not proud of every choice. I was harsh with people. I held impossible standards. I wasn't always kind. But I cared. I cared deeply about the work, about the craft, about building something right. And I cared about truth, even if it hurt. There's a story I rarely told. When we were developing the iPhone, we realized late in the process that the plastic screen scratched too easily. I took one of the early models out of my pocket, and it already had tiny marks. That wasn't acceptable. We made a huge change, switching to glass, just months before launch. It was risky, expensive, and technically difficult. But it was right. Because every product we made had to earn the Apple name. And now you, holding that phone, swiping through your day, you're touching that story, that obsession, that moment in a room where we said, "No, this isn't good enough." That's what I want you to remember. Not me as a legend or a genius, but as someone who cared. And if you're building something, your life, your business, your art, care about it deeply. Make it honest. Make it human. Make it yours. Because in the end, all we leave behind are the things we touched with love. The final chapter of any story, especially a life story, isn't really about endings. It's about reflections, echoes, the little details that come back years later and make you smile or wonder or ache just a little. You know, some people assume I spent my final days obsessed with business, checking in on product launches or stressing about market share. But I didn't. In those last months, my mind turned to my family, my children, my wife, my regrets, and my gratitude. There was so much to be grateful for. Lorraine, what a force she was, strong and soft in perfect measure, the real foundation beneath all the noise. She held me steady, especially when my health faltered. She created a home not just for me, but for the rhythm of our lives. Quiet meals, shared books, warmth. To my children, I hope they remember the calm moments more than the storms. I hope they know that even when I was consumed by my work, my love for them ran deeper than words. I wasn't always present. I wasn't always patient. But my heart never strayed. There were nights I'd watch them sleep and wonder what kind of world they'd grow into. Would technology make them more connected or more alone? Would they use these powerful tools to create or consume? You, listening now, are living in that future. Are we doing better? Do you feel more connected? Or are we still wandering, searching for something real in the hum of notifications and the glow of endless screens? I used to believe that technology could make life richer, more beautiful, more human. But it's only a tool. It reflects who we are. So if you're building something, especially something with code or circuits, ask yourself, is this helping people live better lives? Is it bringing them closer to each other, to beauty, to truth? If the answer's yes, then you're on the right path. And if it's no, maybe it's time to rethink. I wish I could have stayed longer. There were more things I wanted to see, more dreams I hadn't chased, more sunrises, more time walking barefoot through an orchard, more long talks about design and purpose and wonder. But life isn't about having more time. It's about using the time we get. And mine was full. Would you trade everything for more time? Or would you do something extraordinary with the time you already have? Leave a comment. I'd really like to hear what you'd choose, because this moment right now, you listening to my story, this is your moment to decide. And maybe, just maybe, your story will one day ripple out like mine did. Maybe someone will say your name and smile. Maybe your choices, your courage, Your creativity will light someone else's way. That's all we can hope for. To be a spark. The last few weeks of my life moved more slowly than I was used to. My body grew weaker, but my mind wandered far and wide, back through decades of memories, through ideas half-finished, people I missed, and things I wished I'd said just one more time. You'd think, facing death, I would have been afraid, but I wasn't. There was a strange peace in knowing I had lived a full story, a story with drama and triumph, messiness and meaning. I often lay in bed, the afternoon sun filtering through the windows, and I'd think about that garage where Apple began. Woz and I, hunched over parts, joking, dreaming, not knowing how big it would all become. I thought about the original Mac team, their nervous laughter, the tension, the fire in their eyes. I remembered Pixar, too, the animation studio that almost wasn't. How close we came to folding. How sweet it felt to see Toy Story light up the screen for the first time. That little cowboy and space ranger, symbols of courage and friendship. I didn't invent those stories, but I helped them find a home, a screen, a voice. You see, I was never the sole genius. I just had a knack for recognizing greatness in others and making them believe they had it too. And that, perhaps, is the legacy I'm proudest of. Not the iPhone, not the Mac, not even the Apple stores that changed how people feel inside a space. No, it was the belief that ordinary people, with enough heart and honesty, could build the extraordinary. If you're still with me now, maybe you believe that too. Maybe you're carrying that fire forward. Look around your room where you're listening right now. That glowing rectangle in your hand, or on your desk, or tucked into your pocket. Part of my story touched that. But more importantly, your story is touching it now. You're the next link in the chain. Create something beautiful. Say something true. Start something bold. And when it gets hard, and it will get hard, remember this voice, this moment, this invitation. Don't settle. Don't wait for permission. Stay hungry. Stay foolish. It's not just a slogan, it's a dare. The kind of dare you give yourself when the world's quiet and your heart is loud. I lived my life daring to dream. Now it's your turn. Now, take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you want. Let the hum of the world around you fade just a little. Maybe it's night where you are, or maybe the soft light of morning is just beginning to break through the window. Either way, I'm still here, whispering through the past. My name was Steve Jobs. I walked this earth like you, restless and curious. I loved fiercely, worked obsessively, made mistakes loudly, and learned always from the silence that followed. And though I'm gone, parts of me remain. They remain in the tools you hold, in the fonts you read, in the way your finger swipes across glass without even thinking. They remain in the spirit of those who refuse to follow the map and choose instead to draw their own. But even deeper than that, I live in the questions. In every time you wonder, could I make this better? Or, why does this have to be the way it is? Or, what if I just tried? That's where I live now, in the what if, and I hope, more than anything, that you don't stop asking it. Tonight, let those questions settle softly in your chest, like stars waiting to be named. Let your breath slow, your mind rest. You don't have to figure it all out right now. The world will still be waiting in the morning. And maybe, just maybe, your idea, your kindness, your strange, beautiful dream is exactly what the world's been waiting for. I believe that. Because I've seen it. I've lived it. And now I leave it to you. Sleep well, my friend. Sweet dreams.